All right, here we go. Another video mini lesson. Another video mini lesson. Another video mini lesson. Another video mini lesson. Another mini video lesson. That one. All right, here we go. Another video mini lesson. I'm shooting this 3 days after the election of President of the United States, and I've kept myself completely in a black box, so I don't know. We may have already picked a president. It may still be up in the air, but for me personally, it's Schrodinger's election. And if any of you want to use that as an extra credit opportunity, look up Schrodinger's election, explain what I mean by that, give me a paragraph, and I will immediately give you some extra credit points. Okay, back to the more important stuff. This is going to be a medium to long-ish review of the next essay, the modest proposal essay, I'm calling it. I'm going to deliberately separate this video from the vocabulary, so I'm going to use the vocab in describing the essay. Your ears should start listening for how I'm using these terms. You've already been practicing them in the homework, but I'm going to do a separate vocab roundup video where I just literally go through every single vocab term that will be on the quiz and just give you a nice literal definition for your flashcards and then some examples as to how you might apply them to the essay itself. So this is just the essay outline only with explanation, helpful hints, and some of the grading criteria explained. So, as many of you have already figured out, I talk too fast and I talk too much. So in terms of this essay, let me just give you the most simple breakdown before I go ahead and over-explain everything to death yet again. So if you only want to strip down the essay to its most bare essentials, just think of it this way. Pick a career field that you'd like to talk about. That could be a career field you're definitely going into, thinking about possibly going into, or it could be a fantasy career path that you don't think is likely, but it's just a world you'd like to spend some time in. So pick a career field. Try to pick a challenge within that field, like what's a common problem that somebody working in that career path might face, and talk about 3 separate solutions. That's it. That's the entire essay. Pick a possible career path, present one problem within that path, give me 3 separate and distinct solutions to that problem. So that's the most simple version. Here comes the drastically over-explained and over-engineered version. Still trying to keep it relatively simple. There are 2 main elements to this paper, 2 main ways I'm looking to give you credit, and those are creative problem solving. So can you think outside the box? Can you think laterally? Are you able to bring some innovation to problem solving? And then logic and critical thinking. Chances are one of those 2 halves will appeal to you more than the other half might. So for instance, some of you who are more abstract and open-minded and creative, you're going to enjoy that aspect of the essay. You're going to like the fact that you can be very creative, you're supposed to think outside the box, and deliberately show your brain can step out of the rut that an average person's couldn't. Many of you will say things like, I hate creativity, I'm not creative, I don't like being creative, it's too much pressure. That's probably because you had your creativity beaten out of you by something like public school and standardized tests. Totally understandable. But if you think of yourself as more literal and more concrete, you will prefer the other half of the essay, which has to do with deliberately being more logical, using your understanding of cause and effect in the real world to make a very logical case as to which of these solutions is best. So you may find one of those 2 less comfortable. That means you just turn the volume up on the other one. If you're more creative, you're more likely to think outside the box, deliberately try to exploit that in the essay. If you are more buttoned up, more concrete, and more literal in your thinking, then you can deliberately make the essay a little bit more methodical, logical, and based on a kind of a very real world sense of cause and effect and what makes things happen in the real world. So if we were doing the seated in-person version of this class, I'd spend a little bit more time on the history of the name. Very briefly, the name, the Modest Proposal, or A Modest Proposal, is based on an essay from way back in 1729 by Jonathan Swift, and it was deliberately lateral. It was very kind of creative, and it was for the purpose of satire. So he describes the problem of massive poverty, kind of this massive underclass of people who are starving, they're desperate, they're destitute, and so he writes this 15, 18-page pamphlet explaining a lateral solution to that, which is, well, if there's so many poor people and they're starving, why don't we just kill the babies and eat them? Again, he was doing it to make a satirical point, but you should kind of throw your head back and say, whoa, that's not the first kind of solution that I would have thought of. And that's the point. In the essay, you want your first solution to be lateral. That means it could be weird, it could be dangerous, it could be illegal, it could be completely absurd, but you're trying to stretch. That first solution is you saying, look, I can come up with a solution that's not like everybody else's, and that will be a challenge, as I said, for some of you. Your objective really is just a matter of trying to exploit both halves of your brain. You're using that creative part of your brain to come up with an interesting lateral solution, but you're also using the more logical, more buttoned up part of your brain that appeals to logic and real world cause and effect. Okay, here are the basics. Again, if you're reading this correctly, think of the basics as the bare minimum that you need to pass. If you've met these criteria, there's a very good chance that you have passed the paper. Doesn't guarantee anything, but here are kind of the basic bullet points you want to keep aware of for this next essay. A lot of you are forgetting to put your thesis statement in boldface type. That's just a wasted 3 or 4 points you shouldn't have to waste. I think it's also true that some of you aren't willing to commit, and that is kind of the point. I want you to commit to one sentence that you think is your thesis statement. So make sure you have something you feel confident is the mission statement, a single sentence that predicts the entire arc of the essay. Problem is described clearly and thoroughly. Here's where you can use some concrete details, some cause and effect logic. So I'm going to come back to the nursing example from up here. Let's say you're a nursing student. You're writing about dealing with narcissistic doctors who are bullies or even sexually exploitive. And so what you want to do is talk about the problem, the logistics of the problem, and you can even get into some cause and effect there. I think doctors, because they have gone to school for so long, may have some kind of a God complex that makes it feel like they're better than everybody else. So that could be one cause or one variable that leads them to be abusive or insensitive or unthoughtful to the people beneath them in the hierarchy. So you describe the problem, you describe it clearly, you talk about causes of the problem, and by definition, the effects of the problem is what makes it a problem in your particular field. Next, you want to make sure you've got your solutions in order. This is an unusually prescribed essay. I'm telling you the organization. I'm even going to give you an outline for this essay that's pretty prescriptive. You just follow the outline step by step. And that means that for all of you, if you're shooting for the A paper, you're going to start with the weird solution. You deliberately want to pull out the one that's the most bizarre, the most off the beaten track, the one that is the most lateral and most creative by definition. So on the homework assignments, when you were thinking about how to extricate yourself from a party, or if you're thinking about different approaches towards dealing with a personal problem, that was a direct exercise for the essay where you practice turning the filter off on your brain. Don't worry about legality, don't worry about realism, but try to brainstorm at least a few really bizarre, strange lateral solutions and pick the one that's the most interesting or the most fun. That'll be your first solution. And then you only need two more solutions in ascending order of likelihood of success. So the second one, middle of the road. Third solution is the solution you just feel is most likely to succeed in the real world. So make sure you're comparing and contrasting them to each other. You're doing some pros and cons of each solution. You're kind of walking me through why this solution might be good here, but it would be less good in this other situation, or if we compare it to solution number one. So just let the solutions talk to each other. You're basically making a case as you move towards that third solution. The third solution is the most likely to succeed. And that gets us to some nice easy stats, like it has to be no less than 3 full pages top to bottom. I don't take points off on this essay if it goes beyond 5 pages. If you need the 6th page to really do a good job describing things, that's fine. But shoot for that sweet spot of about 4 or 5 pages if you're shooting for the A. Don't forget, a lot of you have not been titling your essay. You're just calling it things like the soundtrack essay, or my music essay, or the letter to the editor. Those are my titles, those are headings. So make sure you give your essay an original title, something that reminds me of your main idea, just kind of immediately gets me into the world of that essay. And for a lot of you, this is the big wild card for this essay, the short video presentation in which you would do what I'm doing here, record yourself for a few moments, talking through some aspects of the essay. I'm going to go into more gruesome detail about that when we get to the end of the directions. Okay, so this next section is kind of hanging out here at the end because I had to add it after the fact, because it is pretty open-ended in terms of how you could approach this paper. And I wanted to give you two kind of layers of magnification, like you can kind of zoom in or zoom out depending on what makes the essay easier. So let me talk through this example and then give you one more example of the same principle. So let's say you're writing your essay about joining law enforcement. You want to become a police officer, you're in criminal justice right now, and so you choose to make that the focus of your paper. I'm going to argue your first choice is a little easier. This would be like an immediate threat that you would face as an individual in the career. So for instance, if you're a police officer, it's very likely that at some point, and probably frequently, you're going to encounter somebody who has mental illness. And you're going to have to make different choices about how you engage with that citizen on the basis of the fact that you think it might be more mental illness than as opposed to a more obvious antisocial behavior that is just a straightforward broken law. The person knows they broke the law. So that's a challenge you're likely to face. So the essay would describe that problem, kind of describe how that problem could arise or could come about, and then eventually you get to talk through three separate and distinct ways you might approach that problem as a police officer. That's option one. Option two might be a little harder because this is zooming out and you're looking at not just a problem you could face individually, but a threat to the field at large. So a problem that might face the entire industry, the entire group, the entire demographic of people who work the job that you're working. So this could be something like, if you're becoming a police officer now in this political climate with the civil unrest and Black Lives Matter, you're going to face some PR problems. There are situations where you, as a police officer, the entire career might be changing, and that's something that's going to evolve over time. So there you describe that problem and then present three possible ways that either you as an individual or the group, like police officers across America or state troopers in New York State, might be able to solve that problem. So I'm going to suggest the first one because it's more you-centric. It's a problem that you can solve as an individual, and you kind of give me three approaches to that problem. But if you want to zoom out and talk about aspects of a threat to the field, totally fine. Here's another example of the same concept. I have some students who are interested in the environment. They're obviously going to go into some element of biology with a focus on the environment and protecting the environment. As an individual, you're going to face dangerous civil unrest in other countries. Like you may have to go to some countries in Central America where your physical safety might be in danger, but you got to go there to see the rainforest before it's gone, and you have to figure out how to navigate social unrest in those countries. But that's something that you could decide how to deal with as an individual. Zooming out might be something like a larger threat to the field is the fact that the Great Barrier Reef is disappearing. It's kind of getting bleached out of existence. And so you could say that's not an individual problem that you would face, but if you're going into marine biology, the disappearance of the entire Great Barrier Reef is a larger threat to the field, and you might have to work with other environmental scientists and marine biologists to kind of decide different ways you could approach that larger catastrophic threat to the field. So again, it's just about deciding if you want to zoom in and be more centered on how you as an individual would solve a problem, or if you want to zoom out and talk about how your group, your people, kind of your career compatriots are going to deal with this problem at large, or anywhere in between. It's kind of a sliding scale. So email me if you have questions about which paper you think might work best for you once you've decided on your overall topic. All right, so on to the part that most of you want to hear about first anyway, the due dates. Terms of what's going to be most important soonest. As I said, I'm going to put together a full comprehensive vocab review on video, hopefully within the next day or two, and that'll give you every vocab term on the quiz. I think there's 9 of them, and you'll have a nice straightforward definition, but I'll also try to explain how you could use those terms to boost the grade on the actual essay itself. So look for that to come out. Since the quiz is going to be November 12th and 13th, it'll be open for that whole 48 hours. You want to be comfortable enough with the flashcard definitions by then to feel good about the 10-point quiz, which again is low stakes compared to the 100 points of the essay itself. Next, of course, we've got the extra credit. If I can get your essay in my possession by 11:59 on the 16th, immediate 5 points added to the essay. That takes a D plus into a passing C minus. It also takes a B plus into an A minus. Also takes an A and bumps it up to an A plus, which is like 105 the way I grade. So not nothing. Makes life a little easier for me if I get the paper earlier. Makes it a little easier for you because you can go into the weekend guilt-free. But if you're going to take it all the way into the final hours, 11:59 p.m. on November 18th will be the final deadline for the essay. So make sure you have whatever you feel good about in my possession by then. I'm deliberately going to have the video due afterwards. There's a couple of reasons I decided to do that, but one is if you're torn between I'm anxious about the essay, I don't know how that's going to go, but I'm also anxious about this video because I have to be on camera talking into a black box. If you had the choice between spending more time on your essay or worrying more about the video, the essay is more important. It's specified, I hope, at the top of this assignment that the video is only worth 10 points of the overall grade. If it's not, I'm telling you, it's only 10 points of the grade. So that means percentage-wise, not a huge deal. And I'd rather you spent more time dealing with the essay, putting as much effort into the essay as you can, and then you know you've got a cushion. You've got another 2 days after you hand in the essay to cobble together whatever you're going to do for this mini job interview presentation. All right, there it is, right there in black and white. Only 10% of the grade. Here it is, the job interview presentation, which for some of you, you won't even bat an eyelash. You'll just kind of like blink and this will be over. And others of you may have a little more anxiety, a little more trepidation, a little more insecurity. But wait, Mr. Vogt, I'm not insecure. I just don't like talking in front of people. That's fine. I'm sorry that I made you feel defensive by calling you insecure. The point is that some of you will struggle with this, others of you, it will barely even matter. This is one of the few things I actually have to make you do according to SUNY. So this is like built into the SUNY institutional learning outcomes that you have to have some evidence of oral proficiency where you've spoken and articulated something clearly and thoughtfully. So yes, you do have to do it. Yes, it is part of your grade. It's only 10%. And here's the easiest way to do it. You can kind of massage this and make it work for you. If you want to change the format, just email me, that's fine. The easiest way to do it is just imagine that a job interviewer, let's say you're interviewing for becoming a police officer, it's in a precinct you're really excited about, and so of course you're going to have to go in, you're going to have to answer questions, there'll be a panel of people observing you. There's two most frequent questions that you're going to get asked at these job interviews, and this is almost universal. Question number one is, do you play nice with others? Are you a team player? Are you able to collaborate? Can you work with others to solve problems? So have an answer for that no matter what. Chances are, unless you're going into the forced service industry and you're going to be completely alone, how well you work with others, very important skill. Have an answer to that question. Second, and almost as popular a job interview question is, tell us about a time that you faced a challenge in your field and how you dealt with that challenge or problem. So obviously you can borrow heavily from the essay itself and essentially just retool that to answer that question. And you can just start right in the middle, pretend the interviewer already asked you, and you could immediately open with, well, I'm glad you asked that, and from my own experience working as a security guard, it's really a challenge if someone approaches you who might be threatening, but you're not sure if they're mentally ill. In a real world interview, keep in mind it could be one of two frames. It could be hypothetical. If you were to encounter this particular problem in your field, how would you handle it? And they may deliberately throw a bizarre or challenging problem in front of you to see you work out some creative problem solving in real time. Or just as likely, they may ask you about your own experience and you give them a narrative of a time through your own experience that you've dealt with a challenge and how you dealt with that in a way that might bump up your credibility over other candidates. Again, you don't have to structure it this way. You can structure it however you want and kind of tweak the organization as needed. But I'd say the easiest formula, if you're just looking for the most straightforward way to get this done, is imagine two answers to that question. The first one is what the other candidates would do. Everybody else in that room, the other 9 people applying for the exact same job that you're applying for, you present their mediocre solution, kind of talk through some pros and cons. So that might be borrowing from your papers, either a really weird lateral solution or your middle of the road solution, or you can just create an example of what not to do. The typical person who doesn't know as much as me as a candidate might make this mistake, talk through that a little bit, and then say, however, what I would do is this instead. So what you're doing is creating a sense of contrast for the interviewer. They can see, this person not only knows what not to do and what a typical mistake might be, but they are sophisticated enough to know the more intelligent way of dealing with the exact same problem. This is actually a case study that I got from an actual student. I've actually gotten this kind of paper from multiple students, but some of the wording and some of the way that this person approached the problem is unique to them, and they got a very strong A or A+ paper out of this setup. So here's what they did for the video presentation. This is the nurse talking about the narcissistic doctors who are aggressive, they push people around, they might be bordering on abusive or getting into some uncomfortable territory that has to do with sexual harassment. And so what this nurse did as she was interviewing for the job was present the overreaction first. Well, even before things got out of hand, some people might either scream or get defensive or go straight to human resources and file a report. And that suggests maybe somebody who can't handle situations on their own at that level. And what this person did was create a however. During my time working in the psych ward at Buffalo General Hospital, I learned how to de-escalate situations by being assertive, keeping boundaries, and never confronting the male doctor's ego directly. I informed HR, so a letter was on file, but was able to keep things professional without losing control like the other nurses. Little dig at the end there, little backspin, little English on that. And that got her the job, so some version of this answer actually got her hired. And of course you can see how much the interviewer learns from that. So they can see her initiative, they can compare her in their minds to other candidates, and of course she's exploiting the two main points of the essay. She's showing that she can be logical and she can use her sense of cause and effect to interact with the world, but she's also choosing the best option. She's being lateral and creative enough to not go with a default knee-jerk abstraction loop style reaction, and she got the job. Again, if I'm overselling it or over-explaining it, really you can just think of this as 3 to 5 minutes of you on camera. You can use some notes if you want to, as long as you're trying to more or less try to engage the audience. Just talk us through a couple elements of your paper in a way that show off those skills. So 1 or 2 solutions, describe the problem, that's it. That's all you have to worry about for the video component of the essay. So if you do the essay anywhere close to right, if you land anywhere near the drop zone with the essay, essentially talking through a few aspects of the essay should be totally fine for the video presentation component. Alright, there is the short basic setup for the next essay. As always, email me with questions. Look for this screen as the thumbnail for the next video mini lesson, in which I'm going to go through all the vocabulary. You're familiar with most of it up to this point. You've heard me use it. You've been dealing with it in the homework, but I'll make sure I have one video where you get every single term that's going to be on the quiz with a basic flashcard definition and some examples for how you could apply those terms into the essay to boost your overall grade. Take care out there. As I said, extra credit for Schrodinger's election. I'm going to stay in the black box for now and see what physics does. All right, see you next time.